Today we'd like to introduce a concept called value innovation. When we think about value, we often reconcile that we can either buy a premium product and pay a premium price, or that we have to pay a low price for a low value product. And what we want to look at with value innovation is what opportunities are there to offer a premium product at a low price, and in that way somewhat change the dynamic of how many competitors emerge and how many competitors compete. What we'll also talk about with value innovation is the concept of blue ocean strategy and what's involved with looking at markets that might be relatively uncontested rather than competing within the red oceans with the existing competitors trying to fight it out. Can we find these blue ocean opportunities to create new and interesting value?
And what we mean by that is that blue oceans typically are areas where we can do something new. We can do something novel. We can do something reasonably irrelevant in the context of what competition is doing. And in that context, too, we want to think about new demand and new opportunities. Now, the red ocean is where most companies compete. Most companies want to beat the competition. Most companies want to fight for current customers. Why are blue oceans blue and other oceans red?
I guess it's referring to like the blood in the water.
It's the blood in the water. So in that way, again, it's a bit grim, but it's, I would argue, accurate. And that if you're out there fighting with customers, if you're trying to duke it out and do, for the most part, exactly what one another does, and you're trying to fight for customers that are already being served, it's a bloody battle, it's expensive. Some companies win, some companies lose. But if you can find something that is relatively unserved and relatively new, that you can differentiate, and there are not a lot of people that are trying to battle it out, you can be innovative in how you're going to create and serve that market and how you're going to add value. And you can also look at different ways that cost and value are perceived in that market. Typically, we think these things are at odds. Typically, we think that if I'm going to add high value, it has to be really expensive. Or for it to be low cost, it has to be of minimal value. And so this approach somewhat inverts that, and it recognizes that there is an intersection where you can add high value without necessarily having a high cost. And the orientation of it is to recognize what do customers really want, what do they really value, and how to put your time and your money and your energy in that. And if there are things that are not terribly valuable, but maybe that are already in the market just out of habit or out of practice or out of legacy or just out of the status quo, those might be things that can be eliminated or can be reduced. And so in that sense, we want to think about what are some big ideas that we have as entrepreneurs, recognizing that we have scarce resources, we need to be efficient, and we need to be effective. What's the difference in efficient and effective? Two words you hear almost synonymously. How do you describe efficient versus how do you describe effective? Or are they the same thing? Yep.
Efficient is just getting something done in minimal time.
Okay, efficient tends to be tied to time or resources. I can get something done efficiently, meaning relatively quick, relatively inexpensively, fast. What's effective? How do you measure if you are effective? Yep.
Reach your goals.
If you met the goals, if you achieved some standard, if you exceeded some level of expectation, is it easy to be efficient and effective? No. Typically not. Typically, if I want to do something fast, I might not have an optimum solution. If I want to do something really thoroughly, if I want to be very effective, it might not be done quick. It might take more money to do it that way. But again, we want to think, too, as we look at value curves of how do you be efficient and effective in your time and resources. And with the value curves, and we'll look at one by example momentarily, what you're doing is you're mapping what are the various features, functions, price points, benefits, etc. of competitors. Is typically where you start. And then you can identify where are there new opportunities or new features that I can add to this. And that gives me some kind of a landscape of I can decide where do I want to invest and where do I want to retract. And again, we'll do this by example. Let me take one step back. So when you look at the circus, what are the features, the functions, the benefits of the circus? Anybody been to a circus? Start there, okay. Anybody never been to a circus? Okay, 2 or 3, 4, okay. So for the ones that have never been, what is the circus? Let's just go down. You been to a circus? Yeah. Give me one word to describe circus. Entertaining. Entertaining.
Fun.
Fun.
Creative.
Creative. Again, give me some things that are specific to circuses. What do you see?
Acrobats.
Acrobats. What do you see?
Animals.
Clowns. Animals. So it's fun, it's entertaining, it's creative. It's fun and acrobats and animals. Anybody love going to the circus? Anybody been to the circus in the last year? 3, 4? Why'd you go?
My mom.
Okay, it's a family outing. Family outing, but we see typically that there are some level of performers, there are some level of animals and concessions and fun and humor and acrobats and clowns and things of that nature. Is it expensive? Is the circus expensive? What's this? How much was your circus? Any guess?
$15.
$15. Okay, so 10, 15, 20, 25. Reasonable. Okay. So let's look at this circus. This is maybe a 1-minute clip.
These are the best.
There's a bunch of
So this is the commercial intro. You'll see live footage from the circus in a moment. So a little bit different than what a lot of you described. How would you describe this?
Bizarre.
Kind of bizarre, kind of intense. Somebody said creepy.
Abstract. Awesome.
Abstract and awesome. What kind of animals do they have? No animals. What kind of clowns do they have? Kind of odd clowns, not exactly the clowns that we're used to. So we'll look at kind of how they changed this market a bit. What's it cost?
$85 to like $100.
About $127 if you're going to go to the touring show that's in Fairfax, Virginia tonight. So they have about 20, I think it's 28 or 29 shows. There are probably no fewer than 10 that are permanent shows in Las Vegas. So they are very popular at many of the top line hotels in Vegas, that they have these shows that run every night and a lot of afternoons. But they also have shows that travel throughout the Americas, Europe, and other places. And the orientation here is that, again, it's not $15. It's not $25. It's $100, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on the show and where it is. But what we see here is that, is it expensive? Well, if you compare it to Broadway, not really. It's kind of right in line, if not a little bit less than the Broadway shows at the 120s, the 180s. So who's their market? They're not trying to be a $25 circus.
I think like older people.
Older people, so not for kids. If you take a kid to this, they may be what? Scared. Terrified.
Nightmares.
They may have some nightmares. And it's not that it's violent, but it's that it's odd. And it's a bit unexpected.
There aren't all of them aren't that odd. I mean,
They come in degrees. They do have some that are based on music. They have some Beatles and Michael Jackson. They have others that are, more water-based. They have some water-type shows. But a lot of them have a little bit of an edgy element to it, a creative element to it. And what they've done with that, if they've recognized that if they want to do animals and do the fun and the humor and the acrobatics and do it at a low price and target kids and families, what's the problem with that?
they're competing with an established market.
You're doing what everybody else is already doing and doing reasonably well. Ringling Brothers has been around a long time. There are a number of small regional circuses that have been around for a while. So again, they recognize to do the same thing the same way as people are already doing it, probably not a lot of value there. Difficult to succeed, difficult to compete in that red ocean with everybody else. So they've done a few things. To my knowledge, aside from Chris Angel, who's a magician that's in their Believe show, so aside from one person out of all of their 20 some odd shows, I don't know the names of anybody. So they don't try and brand a person or have a star, so to speak. No animals. Why no animals?
They're expensive.
Animals are expensive. Elephants and horses and lions are expensive to purchase, to train, to maintain, to feed, to health, etc. Why else no animals?
A lot of people, don't like that circuses have animals because they are being mistreated.
Okay, so there's a broad concern regarding the treatment of animals and animal cruelty and things of that nature that they've elected additionally to solve. And to what extent in their conception did they say, well, we're not going to use animals because of that, or we're not going to use it because of cost, or we're not going to use it because everybody else does it. I'm not exactly sure where they sit, but I know by not using it, they solve all of those issues. You also don't see people going up and down in the aisles selling soda and popcorn and cotton candy. Why is that the case?
Because I feel like Circus du Soleil is kind of a more like high class.
It's a classy establishment. Doesn't feel real classy to have people running up and down the aisle selling M&Ms and asking you to pass down sodas in front of you. And also, you're paying a lot of money. You kind of want to focus on what's going on. And so in that way, again, a bit distracting with that. There's some element of fun, there's some element of humor, but in large part, it is something that kind of sits between a circus and a Broadway and a theater and a musical, because these things typically come with a few other things, and that there is some level of added artistry, music, dance, themes. So all these things that you see off to your right are things that you don't see in the other circuses. So in this way, while there might be a loose theme for some of the other circuses, Cirque du Soleil is really drilled down, and they're telling a story. And it's a story, kind of like a musical story on a Broadway show, that it's not exactly like what you would see in a movie. There's song and dance and other things that are going along. But nonetheless, it's the story that's unfolding. And the theme of it is, again, kind of novel and interesting and about discovery and life and all of these other issues. They've eliminated a lot of things. And so all of those elements to your left, the star performers, the animals, the aisle concessions, etc., are things they've eliminated. They've reduced a few other things. Now, they do some of the thrills and dangers, and there is a bit of the acrobatics and things like that. But they're not swallowing swords. They're not getting in a cage with a lion. So they've taken some of that out. But they've, again, added a lot of new things. These elements of the theme and the art and the music and the dance and the song, and a more kind of sophisticated or classy story and experience. And so when you think about that, and you think about new opportunities and recognize, well, what's going on in the market, you can do something similar and get a gauge for, are there things in my industry, are there things in my market, are there things related to the ideas that I want to bring to the market that might be there today but that I can eliminate, that aren't that important, that aren't that valuable? Are there things that I can reduce? Maybe I need some element of some pieces, some features, some functions, but I can do them at a lower rate than others because my customer that I'm going after doesn't necessarily value that versus other elements which I can raise and versus other elements that I can create. So what can I do that's new? And you see it again, we talk about automotives, largely because I like automotives, but how are the new car companies competing with the old car companies? In some way, an engine is an engine, and a door is a door, and acceleration is acceleration.
They release new models of cars, like they're releasing a lot more hybrid cars now.
Okay, so the hybrids have come. What else do you see in cars now that you didn't see a lot of a few years ago?
Well, like using Tesla as an example, they have the huge touchscreen displays.
Okay, the touchscreen displays and the electronics and the multimedia. So in that way, bringing a lot of that technology, essentially having a tablet in your car, is the direction a lot of these folks are going towards. So you can do your Spotify and your Pandora, and you can have that multimedia experience in your vehicle, and you can have your iPod docking station in the headrest, in the back seats, and other things to make it more dynamic, to make it more modern, and also, again, to further differentiate from what's out there.
So in summary, as we've talked about value innovations, it's important to recognize that value curves are a great asset and a great tool to think about developing and delivering value that matters to your target customers. Within that, we can emphasize what truly matters to them and thereby eliminate or reduce the factors that are going to be less influential of their willingness to pay and less influential of their overall value that they're going to receive from our venture concept. So in that, I encourage you to use this concept of value innovation and think about developing value curves for your concepts.